Right, so we have here yellow ochre, cadmium red light, ultramarine violet, and white. So we'll start with a layer of yellow ochre. I'll put in it ultramarine, we'll put in it cadmium red light, a touch of ultramarine violet to darken it a bit. So we need a darker background. And you'll see why in a minute when we start putting the highlights in there. Okay, let's do that. All right. That's a nice color. It's more like an orangey. Let's darken this orange. When you put ultramarine violet with your orange, it turns a bit more like a brown.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. That's okay.
Or orangey brown.
Yes, orangey brown. Yeah, that's okay. That's perfect.
Like a burnt sienna.
Almost like a burnt sienna, more like a between burnt sienna and a reddish raw sienna.
Yeah.
This is more like the color itself, the paint itself is a bit transparent, but that's all right. I like it. I'm putting a thick layer of paint in here. I don't mind having a textured wall, and I'm going to try to highlight this with try to use a knife, palette knife. Another medium that would look that would be really nice here is the medium that we used to use on the walls. Fiber paste. Fiber paste would be a medium to use because it's not thick, but it has texture.
Yeah.
Now, if I have plants, I'm going to overlap a tiny bit with bring the color in, overlap it a bit with the plant. Okay, now bottom part, this here at the bottom, I'm going to add more ultramarine violet in here. Darken this. So I'm picking up ultramarine violet and I'm just going to add it. Even if it looks brown, that's okay. Because this pot, it's going to cast a shadow over the wall. And even behind the plant, the bottom part too, that you will have darker. Because all of this area here will have a bit of, oh, it's the same actually there. See here, it's darker than here. So okay, let's go back. Over this in this area here, it's the same. We're going to darken this a bit more. And then we'll highlight it. Not highlight it, but not, I'm going to switch to yellow ochre and red with less ultramarine violet in here. Okay, good. Now let's do the wall on the right side. This is a very small area. Push the color of the wall in a bit more over here with more of the ultramarine violet, because all of that, all of those plants, the big tree is casting a shadow over the wall on this side.
Layel, do you ever add cast shadow after?
Yes, I have. Yes.
And would you use transparent for that? Or
Yes.
do you,
Yes, I would use a glaze. So my color would be transparent, and because shadows are transparent, they don't block whatever when you look at a shadow casting over something, you'll see the detail. If there's a brick, you'll see the brick, but it's just darker, right? So usually they're not opaque. So that's what I would do. I would use a transparent color over.
And you put the fiber paste after?
No, you put the fiber paste first,
Yeah.
right? So if you're using fiber paste,
Yeah.
you use the fiber paste first on the wall, let it dry,
Mhm.
paint over it. But if you, let's say, you could mix the fiber paste with color too. You don't have to. You don't have to use the fiber paste first on the wall, let it dry, and then paint it. So you could use it any way you like. But I prefer to use it first, put it on the wall, let it dry, and then paint
Yeah.
over it. Because I find that I have more control over the color if I do that, if I do it this way.
Mhm.
Okay, so now I'm using yellow ochre and red, cadmium red light. I put a tiny bit of ultramarine violet in it to tone it down. I really don't have to tone it down that much. It's not a bright yellow, orange, because I'm using yellow ochre. I'm not using yellow. So it is a toned down earth color kind of orange. So if I want to highlight, or if I want to use the knife with this, I would pick up my color with the knife. I like to make sure that it's kind of, my colors are clean on my palette knife. And all I have to do is just take my knife and just drag it down. Now I'm going to drag that color down, because there's not a lot of, I'm picking up the color mostly at the top of the knife, not the whole thing, not the whole. And I'm going to grab this color and start, not from the top, because I want to keep that dark in here.
So it's only the red light layer?
It's only, sorry, what's the question?
The red light?
No, it's cadmium red light and yellow ochre, lots of yellow ochre.
Oh, so
And-
it comes, yeah.
Yeah. and a touch of ultramarine violet. Now, I usually grab my brush because the edge of the wall here. These are two walls, one in the front and one in the back.
And one in the back. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to clean up the edge here. Sorry, I have to turn it around for 1 minute. That will give me a clean edge. Don't make it too thick. Your color, the palette. When you use the palette knife, don't make your color too thick. You don't have to make it thick. You just need texture. That's all. So if you make it thick, then it's very hard to paint over that, because we're gonna highlight more. I'm just doing more like a medium tone, the same, but I'm grabbing more ultramarine violet for down here, because I just want to have same kind of texture down here. Just a bit, not much. Doesn't have to be too much because it's dark. You're not going to see it. You see the texture more when you highlight. Okay, it's a nice color. I'm going to grab more of the orange I have, and I'm going to put in it a little bit more ultramarine violet at this point, because I'm doing the darker wall in the back right here. Ah, that's perfect. Okay, so you see this right now. Oh, the glare on this thing is right here. I don't have a straight edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go like this. And drag down. That's even if I use a brush when I'm highlighting, because of the thickness of the color, it'll be good. I'll see the texture, and you'll see in a minute when it dries. You'll see how I'm going to highlight this even with the brush without having to use a palette knife. All right, let's do this wall here too, up here. Perfect. Let's do that. I'm not a fan of the palette knife.
Me too.
So I try to keep it clean and keep the texture interesting, not too busy. Okay, so that's good. Let's clean up the edge right here. And with a wider brush, just kind of work on this texture and make it smoother, tiny bit smoother, not much. I'm just kind of fixing it a bit. You know, with the knife, you don't have the same control over your over the text with the texture. Okay, so for this wall around the door, I'm using fiber paste, but instead of using fiber paste with a palette knife, I'm using it with the brush. It's thinner. It will be a thin kind of texture, not too heavy. And we let it dry. Fiber paste usually dries transparent, I think. I can't remember if it dries white or transparent. We'll have to wait and see. Sometimes I put a bit of water in there. It's easier for the brush to move with the fiber paste on it. Dip my brush in a bit of water and put fiber paste on it. This is good to do to prepare for next week, so we can work on this, putting fiber paste tonight here. If you have fiber paste, if you don't have, that's okay.
Another medium.
Mhm.
Another medium.
Any medium, even if you don't have any medium, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
I rarely use mediums. I like paint only. But from time to time, it's fun. Okay. Another one inside. I'll go across like this, and then down. So it's the same all around. Okay. Now, one more. So I think this wall, this wall has 3 layers. It's going to go all around the door. Once it's dry, we'll paint over this. Perfect. Okay. Okay, so I'm mixing here yellow ochre and red, and I'm going to start highlighting. Okay, I'm just testing the color on this side. I like this color, it's good, but I would like it to be a bit lighter. So you could take white, put it in, and that will give you a nice highlight, nice color for the wall to highlight it. Or fiber paste, or both, white and fiber paste. I'm not putting a lot of fiber paste in there. So make sure I'm highlighting exactly where I want the highlight to be, because this is light. Oh, I love this texture. And turn it around. I just need more control. Pick up some more paint. Come back here. And my highlight doesn't have to cover completely the wall all over. I could just have a tiny bit. Leave some areas dark. It looks like the paint is peeling off. So I have my palette knife on the side, then I put it flat. Again. Now, if I highlight too much up here, it's okay. I can always go back and glaze this color to give it some shadow in here. Now, this wall is not as light as as that one here next to it. So what I'm going to do is the same, take my color, but less white in there. Take my fiber paste. Okay, now come to this one here and see if I need to go darker. Just a bit. So I'm going to take ultramarine violet to darken it a bit. Good. And again. Ah, that's good. Okay, that's good.
So you added ultramarine violet to those colors?
Yes, yes, to the wall, to this wall, yes. The next wall, you know, the one next to it, it's just slightly darker than the one in the front. And I'll show you in a minute when I put my canvas back this way. Yeah, you can see that this wall is slightly darker than this. Okay, good. Now I'm going to add more ultramarine violet because I'm going down. I'm gonna put color down here. I mean texture and color. So I'm gonna darken this wall at the bottom with ultramarine violet. Clean my palette knife because it becomes really okay. So now that I have texture, what I'm going to do is take my brush, any brush. This point, the color is still wet, and I'm going to soften a bit the texture if it's too much. Sometimes you might need to kind of adjust the color a bit if the colors are not blended well. Okay, so now what I did with this is I dipped the tip of my brush, just the tip, in water, and I'm gonna come here. That helps smoothing a bit the texture. Okay, now I'm going to take, again, with the brush, ultramarine violet, mix it with the cadmium red light and yellow ochre and a bit of white in it. And I'm going to come here because this looks kind of, it's like surrounding the lantern. So what I'm going to do is add a bit of ultramarine violet in that color in here. So it doesn't look like we're trying to avoid the lantern with the texture. So that's, I just softened this. Just around the lantern. And I'm gonna go back now, clean my brush, pick up the same color and put white in it. Oh, sorry, that's too much white. Ah, that's better. Just to make sure that the shadows around this lantern are right, because that's why there's shadow in here, because the lantern is casting a shadow over the wall. Okay, now it's better not to get too close to the lantern with the textures because it would be very hard to paint it there after. So because the texture is only on the wall, not the lantern. I'm just trying to keep a bit of shadow around that lantern because it's not floating, it's against the wall. And because it's against the wall, it just creates you'll see a bit of a shadow in there. I'm just adjusting my value in here because it's drying darker. I don't want it to be too dark, just darker, that's all. So that's good enough. I really like the texture on this wall. Clean my brush. I'm not putting any medium right now. No fiber paste. And I'm getting a really nice texture too. Okay, now we still have this part to highlight. Same, I'm gonna do the same. So I'm gonna wash my brush. Pick up the palette knife. Red. Fiber paste. White. Very, very little white. Okay.
That's turning really nice.
Yeah, but the texture. I love the texture on the walls like that. All right, so this is okay. This is good right now. I'm just gonna keep going, and then I'll use my brush to adjust my texture. Okay, just a bit of more white in here, a touch, because I went back from light and then I went to the dark, not dark, but a mixture of just yellow ochre and red without white. And now I'm going to add some white in here. Okay, let's add some white again. Ultramarine violet with red and yellow. The red we're using and the yellow ochre. More ultramarine violet in here. Okay. Now, wash my brush. Wider, a wide brush. I have a wide one here. I'm just gonna soften this a bit, the texture. Very gentle kind of touch. Sometimes if you find that you have an area that you really like, leave it, don't go over it with the brush. Brushes are great to soften the texture that you have if it's too much. It would be, you know, it would have been a very good idea if I have taped this part and here, before I put that texture, but that's okay, doesn't matter. Now again, the same, I'm gonna do the same. I'm gonna pick up my palette knife, mix again, yellow ochre and red. I'm not gonna put fiber paste. I'm just gonna take white. So I am using the same colors, but making my color a little bit lighter. And no fiber paste. I'm just adjusting my value a bit, and I'm putting a third layer of highlight in here. Not everywhere, just in certain areas. And the light color is not very strong. It's not a light, very light color. It's kind of a medium, but it's lighter than the one that was there before. It just, if you have layers of highlights, it makes it much more interesting, especially because of its textured. Okay, great. All right, again, let's pick up a brush. This looks a bit, right now, it looks a bit funny, this. But once we put the green, it will look good. I'm gonna take another layer. It's ultramarine violet. Oh, geez. Too close to white. I picked up white on it by mistake. That's okay. There we go. This is ultramarine violet, yellow ochre, and red. And here, because this right there is one layer, I just need to bring it back. I just want to give it some texture here, a little bit texture. It doesn't have to be with the palette knife. It's in the shadow area, so you don't really see that much texture in here. Okay, and once I put the lantern, if I need to adjust the shadow around the lantern, I'll do that. But right now, I can't tell. So I'm going to leave it alone. Adjust the darks in here. This is a very dark ultramarine violet in here with yellow ochre and red. And I'm gonna come here. Because you're gonna see the wall in certain areas. It's easier if we do this. If we put the color of the wall, like a very soft brush stroke in here. Then when we put the green, it's okay if we don't have to cover the wall too much because the color of the wall is right there, but it's dark. It's really dark. Okay, good. One more. This area here, we're going to see the same, some texture, some highlights, but not much. And just use the brush. So I am loading my brush with paint, and I'm just putting it here, trying not to smooth it too much. Keep it kind of thick. And there we go. Oh. In the reference, this part of the wall is exactly the same highlights right here and right here. So I'm going to highlight it with a bit of white now. Doesn't have to go all the way down. Usually highlights start from part here. And then when you go further down, bottom of the wall, it becomes darker, slightly darker. Okay. White with yellow ochre and red. Now I'm going to use a brush only. This is really kind of a very, very gentle touch. And I'm using the brush from this end so I don't put too much pressure. I don't need to put pressure on it. All I have to do is just skim over the top with my brush, and it would give me a beautiful texture because with a highlighted color, like a lighter color. And because of the texture of the wall, the higher part of the texture is going to pick up the white or the light color I have on my brush. So I don't need to have a push too much with my brush in. but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful texture and a beautiful highlight. Okay, now one more. I'm just bringing in yellow ochre and red. This is really extremely dark, too dark here. So what I'm going to do is just kind of, let's see if that's perfect. That's just yellow ochre and red. And one more layer. And again, the same idea, just using, just dragging my brush lightly over the wall, and all of that texture that I have underneath gets highlighted because I'm using a slightly lighter color. I'm trying to keep them like, I'm trying to keep this wall slightly darker, but still highlighted. I'm wetting my brush a bit because I want some of the color I'm putting here to go through in the grooves, because I don't want it to be too textured. I want texture, but not too much. Okay, again, I'm going to wet my brush. Wipe it. Oy. I'm trying to have an organic kind of highlight in here, not a straight one. So I'm going to push in my brush stroke a bit. So it looks like because this shadow is the shadow of the leaves, and the leaves are not straight. If you think about why the shadow is there, it's the leaves. So you're gonna get irregular kind of highlight in here. That's better. That's better. Okay. I should stop. That's it.